What's going on, guys? Welcome back to the channel and another video here on Dirthead. Today, what I wanted to go over with you guys is the mods that you need to consider if you're thinking about upgrading to 37s or bigger. Mainly for 37s though, because once you hit 40s, that's a whole nother category, whole nother price range. But for 37s, there are a few mods I have in mind that I think you should heavily consider before upgrading. Now, when I did it, of course, I did it all in increments, so I upgraded slowly, did things here and there when I had the money. So I'll go over those mods that I think that you should consider for 37s. So let's go ahead and get into it, guys. All right, guys, so the first mod that you should consider if you're thinking about going 37s, in my opinion, should be your ball joints. When I upgraded to 37s, my ball joints were shot within like 300 to 400 miles, and they weren't that old. So, and also when I got this Dana Ultimate 44 in the front of the axle, my new axle up in the front here, last year, the stock ball joints were already loose with the 37s. I took a first test drive with it, and it was just terrible. So something I would consider upgrading. The stock ball joints are not meant to hold up to that big of a tire. There are a few brands out there, so let's go over a few brands I would consider for ball joint upgrade. All right, guys, so you have a few different options when you're doing your ball joints here. The brand that I have TerraFlex heavy duty ball joints. I absolutely love them. I've ran them on this axle as well as my Dana 30. Both held up really, really well. These right here have roughly about 10,000 miles on them, I believe, and they've held up wonderfully. So no issues, no complaints about these. They're still very tight. They also come with a tool where you can tighten up. I think it's just the bottom you can tighten up, where you can tighten it up though and make sure it stays tight even when they get a little bit older. So love the TerraFlex ball joints. A couple other brands I would consider. Dynatrac makes a fantastic ball joint. Also, I've heard good things about Rare Parts ball joints as well. Never tried them myself, but heard great things. You could also consider doing a ball joint delete. They're still fairly new to the market, but every single person I've seen that's ran them has had no issues within like 40,000 miles. So that's something I may consider upgrading to when these go out. So definitely something on your radar there. Ball joint should be one of the first things you upgrade with 37s, depending on your axle, of course. All right, guys, another thing to consider when you're upgrading to 37s is your wheels. If you're running the stock wheels with 37s, you are going to need wheel spacers because they are going to rub the frame at full lock. So that's something you're going to want to heavily consider. You could really go anywhere from mild to wild with the wheels. I would, of course, recommend bead locks if you're going to be off-roading a good amount. If you're not, if this is going to be just, off-roading once or twice a year, I would just go with some regular wheels. I really liked the Moto metals I've had. I liked the Ion alloys I had. Lots of great options out there. But if you're going to be off-roading, a couple times a month, I would definitely recommend the bead locks. These ATX slabs have been fantastic for me. But if you don't upgrade them, you're going to do what I did here. And as you can see, you're going to rub the frame at full lock. So I would definitely recommend upgrading the wheels. If you don't have the money to upgrade the wheels, I would just get a set of wheel spacers. The wheel spacers I recommend is the SpiderTrax ones. I've ran them twice now on this Jeep and my two-door. Both have been fantastic for me. So would definitely recommend the SpiderTrax wheel spacers or upgrading to a bigger backspace wheel. That way you're not rubbing on the frame with 37s. All right, guys, and when we're talking upgrading to big tires like a 37, you're gonna have to think about your axle, of course. So if you're running a Dana 30 in the front, which is gonna be most stock Jeeps if you don't have a Rubicon, of course, you're gonna wanna do some upgrades to it. If you don't plan on upgrading to a new axle, which would be the first thing I would recommend just because it's, in my opinion, more cost effective. I've put a ton of money into a Dana 30 and it's still bent. So definitely something to consider. If you have the Dana 30, the first thing I would do is see gussets because as you can see with the Ultimate Dana 44, they are upgraded to be bigger, but on the 30, they're actually quite small. So that C-gusset's gonna really add some strength right here. I would definitely recommend doing the C-gussets first if you're gonna keep the Dana 30. And you can also do, a truss, you can sleeve it, but in my opinion, if you're paying someone to do that stuff, it's way more cost effective just to get the new axle. The Ultimate Dana 44 comes in at a pretty reasonable price, and I would definitely shop around because there are different options out there and different pricing. The Dynatrac Pro Rock is a fantastic option. Also, the new Fusion axles, the 44 they offer is also super, super strong. So there's a few options out there, but if you plan on sleeving and trussing it as well, just be very careful with that. If you can do it yourself, it's definitely more cost cost effective to just do it to your Dana 30 if you want to be more cost effective in that route, because if you're welding yourself, it's not that much money for you to weld it yourself. So definitely something to consider there if you're going to keep the Dana 30. And another thing you're going to want to think about when you're upgrading 37s is your gearing. Now, I've ran in a Jeep with 37s on 410s, which is the stock Rubicon ratio, and truthfully, really not that bad. What I'm running currently is the 456 gears, and it has actually been really great on the road, off-road. I feel very confident in this Jeep with 37s and the 456s. Now, of course, I could go 488 and it'd be a little bit more peppy. It would probably be a little bit more responsive, but I do have the pedal commander in there, which has helped tremendously also. So I would definitely recommend 456 or higher if you're gonna go with 37s, but you can get by with 410s if you have to. But if you're gonna be doing axle upgrades, you might as well just do the gearing as well. Now, the next thing, also pertaining to your axles, if you're gonna be taking this thing off-road with 37s, you're gonna wanna consider chromoly axle shafts. The stock axle shafts will get you by for a little while if you're just doing some light wheeling, but they will break eventually. They're not as strong. The chromoly axle shafts are a great upgrade, and you wanna get the ones with the clips in there, the full clips, not the half clips. If you know what I'm talking about on the C's, they come with clips. Let's see if I can show them to you here. They come with clips right there, and you want the ones that are a full circle. You don't want the ones that are a half circle, and I'm pretty sure the stock axles as well as regular axle shafts come with just the half C, which you definitely want to get the full clips on there. It's much stronger, and it will save you some headaches down the road, that's for sure. Now for me personally, I did chromoly axle shafts front and rear. Now when I did the axle upgrade to the Ultimate 44, it came with chromoly axle shafts. So if you're doing an axle upgrade, that'd be a great way to knock out two things in one spot there, because these do come with the chromoly axle shafts, which was great. In the rear, I did the Nitro chromoly axle shafts, and the reason I did the rear was a big priority for me because that axle, with the Dana 44, the stock Dana 44 in the rear, I think it's semi-float axle, I think that's what it's called. Full float's the one that does not depend on the axle shaft. The semi-float ones, they depend, all the weight of the wheel is on that axle shaft, the flange. So that's why you see so many JK issues with bent flanges, because the Dana 44 in the rear has all the weight of the tires and wheels resting on those flanges. So you're gonna wanna upgrade those too, because you will bend them off-road. I've done it a couple different times. So definitely something you're gonna wanna consider. They're not terribly priced, but they're gonna be probably about $500–600 if you're thinking about upgrading those. And I would definitely recommend the Nitro as well. Nitro has been fantastic in there. Had them in there for about a year or two, and they've ran great. All right, guys, and the next thing here you're gonna want to look at, and this is obvious, but your lift and your fenders. Two huge things when it comes to running bigger tires like these. So with the lift, you're going to want to have at least 2 to 2.5. I would recommend going 2.5 to 3. It's still going to sit pretty low. If you're going to do like an LCG, a low center of gravity build, then you're probably going to stick around the 3 inches, maybe 2.5. But this right here, this is 4.5 inches, and it provides a lot of articulation off-road, still fits in the garage, and it rides super nice. I went with the Metal Cloak coils in here, and they're fantastic. So the lift is definitely something big, but even bigger than that is going to be your fenders here. So you're going to want to get some fenders because the stock fenders are going to ride down a couple more inches. So as soon as you articulate that axle, you're going to be hitting the fender there, and you don't want. Of course, if you want to save some money, you could always just cut the stock fenders. It does take a little bit of time, and you have to cut a few things up. So if you have a Dremel, might be a good option for you. I decided to go with the Poison Spider crusher flares, and I absolutely love them. They are expensive, but they're well worth it. They have bracing right here as well as down here, so they keep everything super sturdy. I've really enjoyed having these on the Jeep, and they look super good. If you can see here, they follow the body line, which just makes it look super good. But there are lots of different options out there for fenders, so just do some research on the fenders there. Any upgrade to your fenders is going to be nice because you're going to get a lot more room for articulation with the bigger tires. So fenders and lift are huge. Definitely recommend 2 to 2.5 at the very minimum for 37s, and then also flat fenders too. All right, guys, and another huge thing to think about with 37s, tire carrier. So you're gonna want to get a heavy duty tire carrier. The stock carrier cannot handle a 37. I've tried, It does not last very long, and you're going to hear a lot of clunks over bumps when you're in the Jeep. So definitely consider upgrading that tire carrier. There are so many options out there. Some of them are really affordable, like, you know, $300 to $400. I ran the Smittybilt one for a while, and it was pretty good. So I would definitely recommend that if you're just looking to get by. I recently just upgraded to the Evo. It's a lot stronger, rides a lot closer to the tire here, which I love, and the operation's super smooth. So very, very nice upgrade here. Let me unlock it. We'll see if we can get this open. Oh, might help if I click it twice. But yeah, as you can see, super smooth operation, very strong, and these are just super beefy. So would definitely recommend the Evo if you plan on upgrading your tire carrier. And again, it's definitely a necessary with the 37s. All right, guys, and something I forgot to mention at the beginning when I was talking about the axle, the rear axle. So of course I talked about the chromoly axle shafts in the rear, but in the rear, the Dana 44 from the factory can hold up to 37s. It's not something that's dire to upgrade. Like if you're going 40s, definitely something you're going to want to think about upgrading. But 37s, you can definitely run the stock Dana 44 with chromoly axle shafts without an issue. Now, of course, if you're wheeling super hard and you're banging the rev limiter, you're going to have problems. But if you're just doing some rock crawling, you know, nothing crazy and not bashing it all the freaking time, you're not going to have a problem with the stock Dana 44 in the rear on 37s. So like I said, I'm running the ATX beadlocks, which are already heavy, with the 37s, and I haven't had any issues in over 2 years. Also never had any issues with my two-door either with the same setup. So would definitely recommend keeping the Dana 44. It's not something you're going to have to upgrade with 37s, except for those chromoly axle shafts. All right, guys, and we are at the end of the things that I really recommend that you get. There are a few optional things here that will make your life a lot easier and give you peace of mind. So I'll name off a few of those. So first and foremost is going to be the brakes. I have not done this upgrade yet, but if you want to keep the stock stopping power, you're going to have to upgrade to the bigger brake system, which does require 17 inches or bigger wheels on most setups. So you're going to want to think about that as well when you're buying wheels. But the brake system is definitely something you're going to want to think about. It's not something that's necessary. I've been running this setup for a while now. Haven't had any issues with stopping. It's just something you get used to. But if I were to have a bigger brake system, I would definitely feel a lot more confident in this thing. So definitely something to consider when doing 37s is upgrading those brakes, but it's something that can wait down the road if you wanted to do it that way. Big brake systems are around $700 to $1,000 depending on what brand you go with, what setups you go with. I'll probably end up doing that here in the next year. Another thing that's optional but something you're going to want to consider and you're going to have to upgrade down the road with 37s after you run them for a while, it's going to be your steering, and mainly the steering box. And this is if you're doing a lot of off-roading like I was doing, or I am doing. My stock box could not hold up to the 37s off-road, and it might have been 37s and beadlocks, like the weight of all that, I'm not sure. But once I upgraded this big bore box from PSC, everything was just so much smoother, nothing overheats. It's just an all-around great setup, and there are multiple different ways you can go with it. You could just do a regular upgraded box and not worry about anything else, you know, the cooler or any of that. But I ended up doing the whole system, and it was well worth it. But what you could also consider doing is hydro assist. If you're going to be upgrading the whole box, it's definitely something to consider. You know, if you're going to be going higher than 37s, like maybe say 40s, hydro assist is going to be pretty much necessary when you hit 40s. So something to consider. If you plan on going bigger than 37s, you may want to consider hydro assist as well, which is going to be a prettier penny. All right, guys, and the last thing you're going to want to think about upgrading, again, this is not a necessary item, something you're going to want to consider, especially because you're going to be lifting the vehicle. You're going to have a lot more stress on the axle and the drivetrain with these bigger 37s. It's going to be drive shafts. The stock drive shafts are okay with the Arzeppa joints. I don't like them at all. I upgraded to the Adams drive shafts. It was one of the first things I did. I think it's something that you should definitely consider if you're going to go big tires like 37s, because it puts so much more strain on the drivetrain. So you can get drive shafts fairly cheap. I think in total I spent like $1,000 on drive shafts from Adams. Adams is a great company. I would definitely consider them. They're out of Nevada. So definitely something to consider if you're going to be going bigger tires like this, especially if you're going to be off-roading. All right, guys, that's going to do it for this week's video. I do get a lot of questions about running 37s, running bigger tires. What are the things I need to do? And to do a quick recap here, some things that I would find pretty much necessary with 37s. Number one, ball joints. You're going to want to upgrade those if you haven't already. Again, multiple options out there. Just do your research. I went with the TerraFlex and I love them. So second thing is going to be your wheels. You're going to have to upgrade your wheels or run wheel spacers. So if you're on a budget, wheel spacers are a great option, but do not go cheap on wheel spacers. You're going to want to get some high quality wheel spacers if you go that route. For the third thing is going to be the axle upgrades, the C gussets for the Dana 30, or just upgrading your axle in general. And you know, I think upgrading the axle is a much more cost-effective option. If you're going to be doing all these mods, you might as well just do it right. Get the axle. It doesn't have to be a major axle. You can just get a 44, but get an aftermarket 44 with some better housing. It's well worth it. Now, another thing, like I said, you're going to want to consider, or you're going to have to do, is your tire carrier. You know, you can go without running a spare for a while, but it's not smart to do, especially if you're off-roading. You're going to want a spare, and you're going to have to get the heavy-duty tire carrier. There are lots of options out there. I've ran the Smittybilt, I've ran the Evo, I've run Rugged Ridge. All three of them have been fantastic. So I would recommend any of those brands. And the last thing you're going to have to do with these 37s is you're going to have to look at your lift and your fender setup. You're going to want some narrow fenders, or not. They don't have to be narrow, but narrow just looks better in my opinion. But you're going to want some flat fenders here, so you have more room to articulate, and you have room for the suspension to actually work if you're going to take it off road. Which if you're running 37s, you're probably taking it off road. And again, you're going to want 2 inches or higher of lift if you're going to run the 37, so it gives you room to really let the suspension work. You could also go with the low center of gravity setup, but that's something that has to be done correctly, so make sure you do your research on that too. And thanks for watching, guys. If you have any questions, drop them down below. I'd be glad to answer them. I've been running 37s now for well over a year, so I've went through a lot of different changes on this Jeep, upgraded a few parts that didn't make the cut. So if you have any questions, please drop them down below. I'd be glad to answer any questions you may have. Also, please like and subscribe for more Jeep and off-road content, guys, and thanks for watching.